He's the host of the second biggest podcast in the world, the #1 podcast in Europe, and the fastest growing video podcast channel globally. Everybody, please give a warm Press Publish NYC welcome to the host of Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett.
Whether you know it or not, professionally, as a creator, you are being disrupted now. Your competitors won't do it. They'll look at that small pebble and go, not that one. So there's a particular 10-second change we made to our podcast on YouTube, which had a 300% impact on the amount of subscribers we get. We've always kept it secret, but maybe I'll talk about it.
This conversation is from Press Publish NYC, our event where we hosted over 400 professional creators to talk about the future of the creator economy. Stephen was our last guest of the day and a surprise for everybody in the room. If you want to get a recap of this session, as well as every session from Press Publish NYC, Microsoft Copilot put together the key takeaways from all the sessions. The link for that is in our description. All right, now for our conversation with Stephen Bartlett of Diary of a CEO. I don't think I've ever seen you in a white shirt.
That's so true. I said to my team, people are going to think I've lost my mind. But no, it was only, we've just been recording all day. So it was the only shirt that was in the studio. So sorry.
Well, dude, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it after recording all day. So I've been holding this question since 2 times ago when we saw each other. Do you know this? Okay, I'm going to say it. So Stephen and I are talking in LA. And I don't even know how this came up, but in the middle of the conversation, Stephen goes, "Oh yeah, but my failure team does that." Oh. And I paused for a second. I said, "What did you just say?" He said, "Oh, my failure team does that." So I've been waiting to ask you about what a failure team is and what they do at your company.
Yes, so I think really important. I actually think if there's one principle or idea or concept that underpins the relative success that we've had on our show, it might be this, which is, okay, so the background context and the thinking underneath this is to understand the correct answer to anything in life, whether it's in your marriage or relationship or on your Instagram page or TikTok or whatever it must be. You need to get information. So the next question becomes, what's the best way to get information in a world where the correct answer is changing at an increasing speed? Like if you listen to some of the futurists out there, they say that if you're 40 now, by the age of 60, you'll experience a year's change at today's rate of change in about 11 days. Things are getting faster. That's what history shows us. So to think that you're going to get the right answer to the key questions you have about your products, your business, your audience, whatever, from reading a book that takes 2 years to publish and another year to write is not smart thinking. You're also not going to get any of the right answers from someone like me, because by the time I've made it up onto stage and then you've implemented it for yourself, the blueprint has probably somewhat expired. So the best way to get answers to the questions that matter to you is to increase your rate of experimentation and failure. And we all intuitively know that run an experiment, failure equals feedback equals knowledge, and knowledge equals power. But when you look at how the world's best companies are built, that's exactly what they do. They kill the guesswork. They build systems to ramp up their rate of failure so that they ramp up their rate of relevant feedback. And so when you look at a company like Amazon, for example, Jeff Bezos says in his shareholder letters, in order to be the company we want to be in the future, we have to be the best place on earth to fail. And the crazy thing that happens is you'll all relate to, if you've ever worked in a big business or really even a big team before, is as people achieve things and they have more things to lose, the psychology shows they go risk off and they go into loss aversion, they experiment less, get less innovative, and that's the start of the end for those people, those creators, those companies. So if we're going to be successful because we had a high rate of experimentation, how do I maintain that and increase it when all the incentives suggest that we should go risk off? And that's why we have an experimentation and failure team. We have a head of failure who leads that team called Grace Miller. And her primary objective is to increase the rate of failure. Notice I'm not saying the rate of success, because if it's an experiment, you don't know the outcome. So you don't incentivize people based on how it's going to how on the outcome, because that's not in their control. The controllable part is, can we run more experiments? So that's what you incentivize. And if you start messing around with the output, you'll disincentivize productive behavior. So that explains it. And like, what does this mean in reality? It means this team is responsible for making sure that all of us in all the teams, production, if I'm talking about like the podcast business, production, the thumbnail team, it could be the e-commerce team, it could be the recruitment team, are constantly culturally, ideologically driving the rate of experiments. If they've got any issues, if they've got questions that they don't know how to answer, if the experiments they're running aren't scientifically rigorous, so they're changing too many variables and we won't be able to trust the results, they create rigor across the board and they report on how much we're driving experiments, and they do experiments themselves. So, one thing that springs to mind, just because it's such a big thing for everybody in this room in a world of AI, is language, for example. So many years ago, about a year and a half ago, we first started doing the podcast in multiple languages. Before multi-language audio, we started doing it with Spotify. And it's taken them about 12 months of experimentation, but we figured it out. And now the AVD in other languages is higher than English, which is like slightly offensive, but whatever.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've never heard it positioned like that. And I think that's... It's a fascinating quest to try and disrupt yourself in some ways, right? Or to try and kind of suggest that the goal is to get it wrong as many times as possible, because that's how we get it right.
I loved what you said the first time when you said disrupt yourself, because that's like entirely the game. Like, whether you know it or not, professionally, as a creator, you are being disrupted now. And the only outstanding question is whether it's you disrupting yourself or some other kid who doesn't have the loss aversion, doesn't have anything to lose, is naive, so they didn't know what convention and the blueprint looks like. They're currently killing you. So, like, doesn't it make a lot more sense? Like, isn't it much, like, the bulldozer's coming, the driver is yet to be determined. I want to be the driver of my own bulldozer. And so we actually have another team called the Flight X team, which is in part of the experimentation team, part of the data science team, who are operating kind of like an island. And they're running things like the AI podcast experiments, where they're taking my voice, creating end-to-end podcasts using my voice, AI doing a lot of the transcripting, and then trying to see if they can beat the human shows that we have. And again, really remarkably, like, you'd think, like, most of you won't believe what I'm about to say, which is fine. But it took us about 9 to 12 months to get to the point where if I showed you all of the retention graphs of 2 human episodes, the Diary of a CEO and our AI one, you wouldn't know the difference. You wouldn't be able to tell me which one was AI based on the retention graph, because the same amount of people are getting to the end. And in innovation and through history, if you read books like The Innovator's Dilemma, the reason why people don't pursue the disruptive innovation like AI content creation is because it starts worse and none of your customers or audience are currently asking for it. So you ignore it. Like the horse and carriage CEOs in the 1800s ignored cars because none of their customers asked for cars. Why would they? They wanted more comfortable carriages, faster horses, stronger horses, and horses that had more power. But through history, whether you look at digging excavators or micro discs or the horse industry, the thing that kills you always starts worse and no one's asking for it. But the thing you have to look for is basically the rate and how much headroom it has to improve. And with AI podcasting, you go, how much headroom does that technology have to improve? Is it going to be cheaper than human podcasting? Is eventually it going to be better understanding what is retentive? Is it going to be faster to make? Am I going to have to build a studio, fly in a crew, or am I going to be able to make it maybe automatically within seconds? And so the headroom of growth is bigger. So you're really betting on the rate of improvement and the space for improvement. So, obviously I loved what I do. So I'm romantic like we all are about what I do. But I'm also like romantic about winning. And so you have to be less romantic about being right. And they're like very different things. Being right and winning are very different things. And you have to make sure that you're romantically attached to winning, not being right.
Romantic about winning.
Yeah, you have to be, or else you'll get caught up in, like, you'll hang on to the wrong horse. Like,
Can you explain the difference between being right and winning?
100%. Okay, so I say this a lot to my founders in my portfolio, my investment portfolio. being right is your initial hypothesis of how you either thought things would play out or you wanted them to play out is validated. And in my first company, a company called Woolpark, when I was 18 years old and dropped out of university, I had this very clear vision that students would use my student notice board on woolpark.com. And I was trying to figure out, I had no money, so I was trying to figure out how you drive traffic to a website. So I started all of these Facebook groups more than a decade ago for every single university. And when freshmen, came to one of the universities in the UK, they would join my Facebook groups. And then, because I was so romantic about them doing it over on my website, I shut the Facebook groups and pinned a post and said, I know you guys are like loving these Facebook groups and there's like a message every 10 seconds. Now go do it on my website. Okay, that's romance. And no one came. Like a couple of people came, but no one came. And so I reopened the Facebook groups again and everybody started doing the thing. And then I'd shut them down and say, go to my website, and nobody came. Eventually I ran out of money, like this process of me trying to force people to do something they didn't want to do because I was romantic about the solution. I ran out of money. And so when I ran out of money, I thought, fuck it, shut down the website and I will focus on social media. And it turned out that like when I had no fight left in me, that built a really big business called Social Chain, which went on to become this big public company and made hundreds of millions in revenue, all those things. And it was when I like gave up the fight of my own romance and preconception of what the right answer was. And, you know, and this is kind of what I mean by AI, with the AI podcasting example. I'm going to be unromantic about the solution. If people want to get their information from an AI podcast, I'm going to be attached to what the customers want, not what I want them to want. And they're very, very different things. I actually think most of you will need to go through a Woolpark style example that I've just described to truly understand how romantic we all are about our ideology and our identity and the university degree we got and how that makes us feel around our parents at Christmas time and how that anchors us in this identity, which then anchors us to these solutions, which can trap us and can mean that we don't see the correct answer when sometimes it's right in front of us. And like I could make the case to you about how profound and disruptive AI is to everybody in this room. And some of you will believe it. And then there'll be another group of people that I think will go through the cognitive dissonance, which is a term that psychologists describe when new information conflicts with who you are and what you want to be true. And the psychologists have proven that you have to dismiss one of these things. You have to dismiss the new information or your own identity to create comfort. And it's very hard to dismiss or to rewrite your own identity. So the smoker who wants to be healthy, who's told that smoking is unhealthy, will say, yes, but smoking helps me with stress. Or yes, but. That's an attempt to alleviate. That's what most people will do. I've tried over time to be principled and not romantic.
I want to ask you, and I want to take a little bit of a step back because I'm listening to you, and Samir and I have had a podcast since 2016. I've never once thought about a failure team, being romantic about winning, about being as analytical as you are. And I want to ask you a question that was actually the first question you asked Casey when Casey was on. You said to him, what do I need to know about your earliest days that informs me about who you are today?
All right, before Steven answers that question, I want to answer a question that a lot of you guys ask us, which is how do we research for our guests and how do we come up with the questions to ask them?
Recently, we've been using Microsoft Copilot, which is the sponsor of this episode. We've been using Copilot to research our guests, and we asked Copilot about Steven Bartlett. Specifically, later on in the episode, you'll see we asked Copilot for questions that Steven Bartlett would ask Steven Bartlett.
So one of the most unique things about Copilot is actually that you can create a podcast out of the research. So I just asked Copilot to make me a podcast researching Steven Bartlett and giving me some angles on what the conversation could be. I'm going to play a little bit of that for you.
Today, we're diving into the fascinating story of Steven Bartlett, how he went from recording podcasts under a blanket to becoming one of Time's 100 most influential creators.
It's not just the information, you're actually getting it in an entertaining way.
So this event that we hosted Steven at Press Publish NYC was also powered by Copilot. And one thing that Mustafa, the CEO of Microsoft AI, said is that voice is going to be the primary way that we engage with AI in the future. So they built a Copilot booth at Press Publish NYC where creators could go in there, get feedback on their ideas, research new topics, and do all of this just by talking to Copilot.
At Press Publish NYC, Copilot was actually the official note taker and recapped the most important things from every single session. And if you want to get all of those notes, we put the link in the description.
So thanks again to Microsoft Copilot for sponsoring this episode and powering Press Publish NYC. Now back to our conversation with Stephen Bartlett.
Okay, so the big picture things. So a lot of shame. I was born in Africa, moved to the UK when I was a kid. We were like the black poor family in our area. And in 1994, there wasn't really any other black families in the southwest countryside of England. That plays a role because it makes you, I think, have an over-index towards like validation and fitting in and being like your rich middle white class friends and chemically relaxing my hair and wearing the skinny jeans and listening to like Arctic Monkeys, even though I had no interest in the Arctic Monkeys. And still don't, but I respect them. And what else was important? Really bad in schools, like couldn't pay attention. Turns out I have ADHD, which like apparently is obvious now. But I'm more like, it doesn't mean that it means that I get like a really obsessively focused on things. I thought ADHD was like you can't pay attention to anything, but actually it's I can't pay attention to things I find really boring, which means that in school I was expelled, then they unexpelled me because I made the school a lot of money. That my headmaster was on a TV show in the UK and said this. He said we unexpelled him because he made the school a lot of money, because in my free time I was running these businesses. And then I think maybe the most important thing is my parents weren't around, so it meant that there was this shame and then this big void of independence. And you have to do something with that as a kid. You have to run an experiment. You have to alleviate your own shame. So that's when I started selling things in the house and selling a few things that belonged to my mum. And then that's, I could buy things and that alleviated the shame. So that did two things. It taught me that there's actually not a lot between any idea you have and the realization of that idea, which is like a really unbelievable lesson to learn at 14. That you can like have an idea that you want to get on the ski trip with your rich white friends, and it costs £700, and you don't have £1 for lunch, let alone £700, and you can find out a way to get the £700. Is like a really unbelievable thing to learn at a young age. And I think that's the most important thing, is that I think I have a bias towards believing things are possible. And then through time, if you want to know like why I am the way I am now in terms of analytical, I've just learned that whenever I find a principle, to really hold on to it. And what I mean by principle is like when something holds to be true over time and in multiple contexts, I get really like attached to that. I actually was speaking to Ray Dalio this morning. He was on the show this morning, and he's the guy that wrote the book on principles. And he says the same thing. He went from being broke to the world's biggest hedge fund. I think he's worth 15 billion. And he says the same thing. He says life is about identifying principles, going through your day, reflecting on what happened, and then writing down the truths that appear to be true, getting as close. And he actually, funnily enough, I didn't even realize this, but he said to me, the other thing is you reflect and you need to get as close as you possibly can to reality. And what he's saying there is what I said earlier about not being romantic. He goes, you have to be, and think about this guy. He built the world's biggest hedge fund and is worth $15 billion. The hedge fund, I think, is worth hundreds of billions, Bridgewater. He says you have to reflect and then get closer to reality. And you have to realize that I'm highly emotional, highly biased, highly insecure. We all are. And that's going to get in the way of your potential. So one of the great things that I did at 21, 22 years old is every single day at 8 p.m., I said to myself that I was going to write a tweet and post it. Now, I thought I was doing that to build a following, and it built a following, which is great, which then gave me a platform to launch the Diary of a CEO. But the more profound thing it did is it meant that I went through days like today, and then at the end of the day, I had to condense everything I'd learned, the most important thing I'd learned, into 140 characters. And if you've listened to Richard Feynman, the physicist, he says that to truly understand something, you have to be able to condense it so much so that you could, and simplify it so much so that you could teach it to a 14-year-old. And that's what I was accidentally doing at 22 years old. So I wish you could meet me at 18 years old. Because like terrible ideas, clueless, university dropout, parents aren't speaking to him, shoplifting food to feed himself. If you'd asked me anything about marketing or anything, terrible ideas. My friends who were there take the piss out of me. They remind me of these terrible ideas I had. But that process of self-reflection on a frequent basis, and especially if you publish it, which means you get feedback, which helps to refine the idea again, is, I think, the most underrated self-development idea that nobody seems to talk about. Every single day, write in your diary, condense it, summarize what you've learned, and then it means when people ask you questions on stage, you have really concise ideas that you can swing to.
So one thing I'm hearing from that also from who you were growing up is a bit of something that I carry, which is a scarcity mindset. Do you feel that? So like that drives me quite a bit. I think it drives a lot of creators. And I think it's why the game, especially of the analytical form of content creation, fills you up, because you can get an abundance or a relative abundance of something: views, validation, money, comments, engagement. You can get a relative abundance. So I'm curious, because one of the headlines we all read about you this year is you turned down $100 million. So when you come from that level of scarcity and you get approached with building a show at the scale of your show, and then someone comes and goes, "I'll give you $100 million, Steven," and you go, "No, I'm good." What's the principle driving that, when what I'm hearing is a kid who grew up with a bit of scarcity?
Yeah, so there's several layers of context here, so I'm going to try and knock them all off. So in terms of like the offer that we received, I think we can beat it on our own and without putting 12 ads into the podcast. So we can beat it by putting 2 ads into the podcast with our own in-house commercial team. Fortunately, I come from a background where I was running businesses for the last 15 years. So I know how to build a team, run a commercial team. My last business was in Brand Deals. That's the company that emerged out of those Facebook groups that I talked to you about, became Social Chain, which did marketing and brand deals with the world's biggest brands. I lived in New York for 3 years, and our clients here were Uber, Coca-Cola across Europe, et cetera, et cetera. So I have that experience. I didn't need a media conglomerate to tell me how to build a team that can do that in-house. So that's the first point. And that's proven to be true already. When someone offers you these big numbers, it's not, you don't get paid the money in your bank account. It's paid over, in our case, 3 years. So you can kind of do the numbers on that. And so my question is, do I think in the next 3 years, will I make more than said figure if we do this in-house? And will this mean less ad load, which is potentially going to create a better customer experience for the audience, which is going to mean the show grows more, and that's going to compound? So that's like one bucket of thought. The other is wanting to be a master of my own destiny in terms of making decisions, which is maybe the second most important thing. And these partners have their own incentives and they move at their own speed. No one's going to let me have a fucking failure in an experimentation team in the old world.
Yeah.
Because I have to explain myself to people. So the old world is set up in a certain way, and sometimes it can be a gravitational force. And the last point is I just love it. And when I think about the trade, the happiness trade of X million whatever, to lose any part of what I love, it's just not worth it. Like, you know, I have a certain level of privilege because my last business did well and the show does well, where I do ask myself a lot these days, any figure, any number that someone offers me, like, how is it going to move the needle on my happiness, if at all? And it's like very, very hard to find something that will move the needle on my happiness. Realistically, nothing will. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Nothing's going to make you, if I get like,
well, I have a question for you, because maybe Colin would ask me this question, but we talk about this quite a bit. Would more time and space make you more happy, or no? Meaning, because you're a very busy guy.
Yeah.
Like the fact that you came here, we're really grateful. But I was like, you're recording all day and you're still going to come and do this. And I assume you're going to go do more stuff. So like, when you think about your life as a creator right now, and as an entrepreneur, when you think about the trades that you have to make, like you're talking about happiness there, like, do you feel like that trade right now is at a healthy balance? Or do you look at it and you go, you know what, if I could buy a little more time and space to have some peace, I'll take it?
So if you gave me 2 more hours in the day and I couldn't spend them doing what I currently do now, because I might accidentally, I would spend them with my girlfriend and my friends. That's like the thing that I think would expand my happiness more. And actually, it was my birthday last week, so I flew all of my best friends over the last 10 years to my house in LA, and we had a week where I wasn't in work. I didn't do any work. Well, not really. And it's like the most amazing week of the year. just to spend time with my best friends who've been there for me for the last 15 years, and to just do fuck all and just chill out and just to catch up and talk to each other. I know this to be true, and all of the billionaires, including Ray Dalio that I interviewed this morning and the billionaire that I interviewed yesterday, they all say the same thing. At the end of the day, and it's super cliche, but it's true, at the end of the day, it comes down to relationships. It all comes down to relationships. And if you ever get like wildly successful and you buy a big house, the first thing you think when you walk in it is, who? Like, that's the question. Who with? Because I've had that feeling of walking into a new big house and thinking, okay, this means nothing unless it's full of other people that I love. And so it's a balancing act of, I've seen so many people, and from podcasting, I've seen so many people that burn all the bridges before they get there. I think I've done a fairly good job of not doing that. I have my same group of 6 best friends. I've been with my girlfriend now for 7 years. Probably should put a ring on it. I know I'm working on that. But I've said before the end of this year.
And here she is. Our last surprise.
But no, it's the most important thing,
How do you, I feel like a problem that we have is actually protecting our time, because we went through 5-6 years of what felt like a lack of opportunity coming our way. And then when we gained some traction, opportunities came our way, and it was, of course, you say yes. You say yes, you say yes, you say yes. And I don't think we've been able to get out of that mindset, really. Like even for us this year, like Samir and I were talking, our homes burned down in January and we both had our first kids. And a couple of weeks later, we were like, yeah, let's do this. I think we could do it. This is the year. And I don't even know if we have the tools yet. I think we're learning them. But how do you have the tools and the frameworks to say no when you, and I'm not saying we should have said no to this, but I'm saying, like, how do you look at opportunities, because you obviously have them coming? How do you know yes or no?
I think maybe this goes back to what I was saying about being really principled, because that's the great thing about principles. They endure through different contexts and over time. And I've spent the last, I'd say, decade getting like really clear on my principles. I spend a lot of time writing as well. So before my birthday week, I was in Cape Town alone for 10 days. And all I did for those 10 days was go through my diary for the last 2 years, all of the notes that I've made. Some of them are sentences, some of them are screenshots. And I converted all of them into chapters for a new book. And I can't tell you how much having some time away from the portrait so you can see the full picture allows you to understand what to do in those moments. In fact, Ray Dalio said to me this morning, he said the single most important thing he's done for his success in his entire career, the single most important thing was he spends 20 minutes every morning meditating. And like, if you're not a meditator, that sounds like super wanky. And you think, not for me, that's for the spiritual lot. But it's remarkable how many of the world's most successful entrepreneurs, innovators, people who you look at and go, how did they see around the corner time and time again? All of them seem to say to me that meditation is the reason. Steve Jobs was a prime example. If you look at the iPhone, the iMac, and his decisions, his counterproductive decisions to remove Java, to take away the headphone jack, to remove the keyboard, all of these things that at the time were crazy people talk, you go, that guy could see something others couldn't. And when you look at his writing, when you speak to Walter Isaacson, who was his biographer and who followed him, who I interviewed, or you speak to Steve Wozniak, who I've met several times, many of them point at the fact that he had a practice where he spent some time in the clouds. Because you're either in the trenches or in the clouds. And sometimes you can feel like you've got the balance wrong. Like you're just kind of running and saying, yes, yes, no. But until you get into the clouds, you can't actually have a proper framework for what the right decision in most of those situations is. And so I think I have that space, which sounds crazy because I spend a lot of time working. But I also have these moments, whether it's with writing or journaling or writing books, where I get to get up into the clouds.
You've mentioned your principles a couple times.
Yeah.
I would love to hear some of them. And we're also in a room full of creators. So if there's like Stephen Bartlett's principles for being a creator in 2025.
So I gave you the failure one. The other one I'd say is sweating the small stuff. The other very popular phrase in our office, some of my team are here, is the phrase 1%. And this kind of dovetails into the idea of experimentation, because there should be nothing too small for an experiment. Like, what's the best way for me to describe the 1% rule? I think in life and in business, and as a creator particularly, it's very difficult to find a big step forward. Like, it's very difficult for you to find a brand new platform that no one has yet to discover, a brand new technology that no one has thought about. So when you go in pursuit of these big steps forward, the science shows and the psychology shows people get quite demotivated. But when you look at Harvard Business Review's study on when people feel most motivated in work, they gave a room full of people like this these work diaries and said, keep a track of everything you do for a week. At the end of the week, people all pointed at a day where they had even a small feeling of progress, even if it was tiny. So there's this dual-pronged benefit to this 1% idea, which is not only if you aim at the smallest things, if you sweat the small stuff and you create a culture within your team, will you get a psychological momentum gain? But actually the thing that we'd uncovered is sometimes when you look at small stones and you turn them over, you find really, really big prizes that you couldn't quite see because the stone looks small. So there's a particular 10-second change we made to our podcast on YouTube, which had a 300% impact on the amount of subscribers we get. 10 seconds. Of a 3-hour, nope. I thought you were going to ask what it is.
It's my event, Stephen.
No, I thought you were going to say, what's the 10 seconds?
I was going to say that.
We've always kept it secret, but yeah, maybe I'll talk about it. I have to think about it.
What do we think he should talk about
It's not-
it, right?
Yeah, everyone thumbs up
if you want to hear him say it.
That's so funny.
I'm hearing that people would be 3,000% more happy if you shared the details.
I think I can share a principle. The problem you have with sharing these things is then everyone does the same thing and it doesn't work anymore. So it's more about the principle. So you get a two-pronged benefit, which is sometimes you try really small things and you get these profound gains. And the other thing is the team are more motivated and you're more motivated if you're finding lots of small wins frequently. And then I would say, you've probably read Atomic Habits, which shows the power of compounding returns. And Sir David Brailsford's a very good friend of mine. He's the first chapter of that book. He's the guy that came up with the marginal gains effect. He said all of the same things to me. He said that when he went into Team Sky, which was a cycling team that was down and out, and like they were leaving the office at 5 p.m., he said to me, he focused not on some revolutionary new approach, but on making the pillows more comfortable, making the water bottles a little bit bigger, tweaking the rider's psychology. And he found so many of these small gains that it had a profound impact to the point that they won 5 out of 6 Tour de France's the next year, a team that were depressed. But he said to me privately, he said they stopped leaving the office at 5 p.m. and they would stay in the bike shop till 2 to 3 a.m. in the morning. That is the power of the progress principle, which is tapped into when you focus on the tiny gains, which most of your competitors won't care about. Jemima's over there somewhere. Jemima changed the candle and like the air freshener, her team, in the Diary of a CEO set, and she posted it in Slack and people dropped fire emojis and claps on it. There was a little laugh in the audience somewhere. That is the advantage. Because when you say that we celebrate changing the air freshener, it sounds like super petty. It's so petty, in fact, that your competitors won't do it. They'll look at that small pebble and go, not that one. We need to find something bigger. But the crazy thing is when Danielette walked into the set, he goes, oh, I love the smell. It had a gain. When we started testing the CO2 levels in the room to see if we kept them below 1,000 parts per million, would the science hold that it changes your cognitive performance? The Telegraph did a piece saying that if it gets above 1,000 parts per million, which is just like me and you in a room for 1 hour, then it's like having a pint of beer. So how are you going to remember that framework that I need for my audience? And how am I going to remember that important question I had to ask you if we've both had a beer? So we introduced the CO2 monitor. The music when they walk in, super petty, but why don't we research the music that Israel Adesanya, the UFC champion, wants that's going to make him feel relaxed? Because he's probably a little bit nervous coming here today. So we found Nipsey Hussle's Double Up, and the first thing Israel Adesanya said when he walked in, man, I love this song. We know. It takes him back to his childhood. I've watched videos of him on YouTube before he arrived, of him listening to that song in the top tiers of a stadium and breaking down and crying, getting really emotional because it reminds him of where he came from. It's hard to find a big step forward. It's hard to motivate for a long period of time a group of people to pursue big leaps forward. It's much easier if you create a culture where you sweat the small stuff and you celebrate pettiness. You get all the gains. You get all the gains of, motivation, momentum. You find, incremental leaps, and That's the strategy. And as you heard from the giggle, your competitors won't do it. And isn't that easier than me coming up here and telling you that there's some like AI coding thing that you need to learn? It's just like care more about the smaller things than like anyone you think you're currently competing with, and then be patient. And if you do that, then all you need is time. And that's what compounding shows us, right? 1% gain over time, disproportionate outcome, like unequivocal outcome. So that's one. Yeah,
That's really
you're not going to ask me
good.
the 10 second.
I like that a lot.
I love that.
That's amazing. That's really cool.
Okay, I'll tell you what it was.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what it was. Basically, the principle here is if someone's heard something over and over again, the science shows that through this process called semantic satiation, the word and the phrase loses its meaning. So if I said to you, father, 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 eventually that started to sound like a sound. And the meaning had come out of the word. And with certain words like warning, 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 because they're a little bit more neurologically curious, the meaning stays in the word longer. So the 10-second thing that I was saying is whenever you have a call to action, just make sure it's not something that the brain hasn't already turned into wallpaper. And as creators, we all say the same things. We all say the same things. But they've shown through history, like the word revolution first appeared in a magazine, it was like 60, 70 years ago, and it was describing like wars and like civil unrest. And then they went through this magazine 50 years, and by the end of it, it was used to describe sofas, like this revolutionary new sofa. The word has lost its meaning over time, so its efficacy, its ability to get people to click, to subscribe, to move, has lost all of its power. So stay away from cliche. Is the principle.
I didn't even have to pry that out of you.
Yeah.
That was great.
I wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that, this is a very niche thing, but and my wife was not that interested in it when I talked to her about it, but she loves your show. And I was like, did you hear his most recent ad read for Stan? It was so good because he led into it totally differently. And I feel like the words, this video is sponsored by, or thank you to us, like that has lost its meaning. Right? Or it's lost its, like, it's,
100%.
as you described, it's wallpaper.
100%.
And you have to find a new way in because otherwise you're in a sea of thousands of those phrases and those words. I love that. I think that's fantastic.
And obviously in a world of ChatGPT, are we going to get more or less wallpaper? Like the spelling mistake is so back. Honestly, I was writing an email on the way here, and I went through the email and like had to uncapitalize some of the letters, make a couple of grammatical mistakes because I genuinely thought that they won't believe that I wrote it. And even on my LinkedIn now, like I'm intentionally making grammatical errors because it's now becoming the signature that a human being did it. And actually, when you just had that ad example of this video is sponsored by, the minute your brain hears this video is sponsored by, off. And like, why do you say this video is sponsored by? We say that because that's what everyone has said before us. And if you look at your whole life through that lens, like, am I just doing this because other people did this a decade ago? And I haven't pushed on this wall to check if it's made of paper yet, which is one of the chapters that I just wrote in Cape Town called Pushing on Paper Walls. Then your life will be like radically different. Your marriage will be different. Your friendships will be different. Your business will be different. You'll make a new thing. Your podcast will be different. I mean, look at, like, controversial name these days, but look at Elon Musk. The reason why he says he's been able to build the Teslas and the SpaceXs is because he's just pushed on every paper wall. When they told him that rockets couldn't be reusable and land on themselves, he said, why? No one says why. No one says why when their brand partner sends them an ad read and says, read this. They go, yep. So if you just develop this principle of constantly checking if things are paper walls, I promise you'll make unbelievably, shockingly unique feeling looking stuff. And you will piss a couple people off. But it doesn't really matter because, like, the game of life, I think, is to piss as many people off as you need to piss off to not piss off yourself, or to disappoint as many people as you need to disappoint to not disappoint yourself. And so, yeah.
How are you able to functionally push across all of these different aspects of your company and your show? Everything from the smallest pebble to the air freshener up to, I'm sure, landing the biggest guests and deciding about some of these bigger deals and where to move the company. Who is around you that is able to make sure that all of this happens and runs?
It's a like really great question, and I think you kind of answered it, which is like it's the who again. It's the people, and Really, no matter what business you're in or what you're doing, I actually don't need to know that this is probably the right answer. Is all things, whether you're a creator or an entrepreneur, come down to your ability to get the world's best people to come and join you, and then the culture you bind them with. So when we talk about people, it's can I get really great people? And then when I talk about culture, I mean all the principles. It's like, what would they do if I wasn't in the room and they had to make the decision? So it's so funny because Jack, who's here as well, Jack, where you at? Is he here? Got bored and left. He's heard all this shit before. Jack's here somewhere. Well, Jack was, oh, there you are. Oh, Jack was just saying to me in the studio, he was saying, it's so funny how this culture of experimentation has like spread across the company now. Because we have lots of new podcasts and lots of new shows. We've got, 80, 90 people in the UK who are starting completely new shows. And his observation was, it's so amazing that those people are acting in the exact same way. And my response to him about an hour ago when we were in the studio was, yeah, at the very beginning, those first 10 people are like the cordial in juice. Do you know what I mean? Like you pour the water in after and it dilutes. But if you get those first 10 people right, the 11th person becomes like the 10th. But what happens a lot is people, like the foundations, the first 10 people, they make mistakes. Culturally, in terms of work ethic, in terms of like values, and that is what's going to scale. That 10, that seed is what's going to grow. So I joke that my actual job in this company is I'm head of recruitment because I sign off all the hires. I wrote the interview form. I spend so much of my time headhunting. The CEO of our media company in the UK tells the story that she saw a post I did on LinkedIn. They replied to it. I responded within 30 minutes. And then within 30 minutes, I added myself to their Calendly. And they didn't think that I'd be that involved in recruitment. There's so many people that know, like I'll call them on a Saturday. They've applied 30 minutes earlier. The most important thing in the game that everyone in this room is playing, including me, is recruitment. And if I look at your calendar now, and I don't see you spending 20 to 30 hours this week on finding truly exceptional people to come and join you in whatever you're doing, then I think you've misallocated your time. Because if I then say to you, do you agree with the statement that everything you accomplish is going to be downstream from a human being's brain? The thumbnail you choose, the commercial deals you sign, the office you take, the strategy you adopt. Can we all agree that comes from a person's brain? So if that is true, then the thing that's going to move the needle for you most in terms of your trajectory is your ability to get the best brains in the building and then get the best out of them by binding them with a culture that makes them do the best work of their life. The simple first principles of business, being a creator, whatever else, building a creative business, hiring, and culture.
I want to ask you about on that, I think team is super interesting. I got added on LinkedIn by one Anthony Smith, who's the director of trailers at Flight Store. And I thought it was so interesting that, we have a pod where we do that opening montage, and we don't have a opening montage department. But I thought it was really interesting to see that you specialize quite a bit. Now, I want to ask you about something that you guys do that is one of the most unique things that I think you guys do, which is the pre-watch system. Can you explain that to everyone? Because I find that to be fascinating.
Yeah, no one's ever asked me that before either. So, you get this retention graph back after you've published something. What if you could get it before? Which was like the thought, what if we could get that retention graph before, so we knew what was boring before we published? Wouldn't that be a great thing? So the TLDR of it is we built a tool that does that. So, this week we just had someone on the show, and it ended up being a 5-hour conversation. And it's very, in all honesty, I didn't do a great job. It's quite messy, subjects all over the place. So before we publish it, we will run tests to figure out what parts of it are interesting by getting, a couple of thousand people in our audience to watch it. And then with the tool we have, it tracks their eyes while they're watching it, with their permission, of course. And so if they look away, if they get bored, if they like a part that they watch, they can hit the space bar and it does a little confetti thing. And then we get this wonderful graph back and it says, well, everybody's dropping off here and people drop off here and people drop off here. And when Steve talked for too long, people dropped off there. So get all those parts out and make it highly retentive. Again, it's the same principle of experimentation. Can we kill the guesswork? In any element of what we're currently doing, is there a way to not guess? And you've only got to do this. You've only got to do this a little bit to realize, like, I've heard Mr. Beast say on your show before, like how annoyed he is that so much of success comes down to like a few variables, like the thumbnail.
Yes.
Because you wish it would be like, oh no, the art of it, or the romance, or how much effort I put in. But it's sometimes these annoyingly, like 70, 80% of the success can come down to like two factors. And so the game is, can I not guess on those two factors? And just to give you a flavor of the variance in guessing, I always remember this one episode where we did some testing, and the best performing experiment drove a 20% click through, and the worst performing guess drove a 1% click through. That is the same 2.5 months of trying to get this person to come on the show. It's the same effort from all of my team, the same financial commitment, the same 3 hours interviewing this person. But the variance, because I ran a $100 test, was 1,900% increase in performance. So you think about that logically and go, why, is there anything really more important and influential than this testing system? And again, the reason why a lot of people won't want to do it is because of the romance piece.
Right. Love that. So going into this, I was so curious, which direction we were going to take this conversation. I actually put into Copilot, I said, what would Stephen Bartlett ask Stephen Bartlett? Have you ever done that? Very deep questions. But there was one that was really concise and simple that I wanted to ask you. And we talked a little bit about your past and your childhood. The question is, if your younger self, if that kid in the Arctic Monkeys shirt, your younger self could see you today, would he be proud or disappointed?
Oh yeah, he'd be I'm going to tell you the most bizarre story to answer this question. He probably wouldn't feel anything. Because at 14, roughly at that age, he had this really interesting vision of being sat in New York at this desk running a company with his feet up. And at the time, the context there is like, we had no money in my family, and we lived in Plymouth. Plymouth is like, I don't know the equivalent in the US, but people don't really leave Plymouth. Me and one of our team members who happens to be from Plymouth were joking that, like, how the fuck are we both in New York? People don't leave Plymouth. So he had an idea that he would be doing something like this. And this is why I say that, in terms of my skills, like my raw skills and talent, it's like really doesn't exist. Not good at spelling, not good at maths, which is when people use the word analytical, I get quite surprised because I'm like, oh, that's like a compliment I never thought someone would say to me. Wasn't good in school. But the most important thing was I had self-belief, which came to me because my parents weren't around. And I had to do things for myself. And in that void of independence, I started doing things. And at 14, 15, I learned this unbelievable lesson that you can have an idea and there's nothing in the way of it. So I remember being 16 and thinking, so vividly thinking, if next week someone said to me, you need to get to the moon, my default at that age is there's a way. I need to figure out what spaceships are going to the moon. I need to send them a cold email. I worked in telesales from 16 till 19. Which gives you a little bit of resilience as well. And I believe there's a way. And I can't, and the crazy story I'm going to tell you is actually something that happened last week with my best friends in LA, over a game of paddle. There's 4 of us playing paddle. I play a lot, so I was in the first place, and then my friend Logan was second, my friend Oliver was third, and my friend Ash was 4th. He was by far the worst at paddle. And I sat down and I watched him play, and I was watching his shots, and I said to my friends, I was like, he's only missing the easy shots. Like the really, really hard shots, he's amazing. His service is amazing, but he's missing all the easy shots. So when Ash came and sat down next to me, I said this to him, I said, you're missing the easy shots. So what I need you to do is every single time, whether you win a point or you lose a point, say this in your head. Say, that doesn't matter, that point doesn't matter, I'm a better player than him. Just say that to yourself after every single point. I swear on my mother's life, he went out, he beat me. He's never in my life beat me. He then beat Logan. He then beat Oliver. He then did doubles. And if you ever have Ash on your team, you lose doubles. Everyone that had Ash on their team won doubles. And Ash said, it's changed in my brain. And all he was doing was reminding, like basically installing temporary self-belief in a moment when rejection can send you on a spiral. And like, I swear to you, since then, since last week, I'm doing that every single day, all the time. And I say this because it's kind of what happened to me at 16. I learned that. Or at least I didn't learn disbelief. And you kind of go one of two ways. You either learn belief or you learn disbelief, and both of them become a self-reinforcing cycle. Either upwards, you try things you probably shouldn't try. Getting vending machines in my school for free that I actually made revenue from at 16 years old. It goes well, people clap, so you try more things you shouldn't try, and you become on this positive reinforcing upward cycle. But some people, at a very young age, they end up going the other way, where they might have tried something or had their confidence knocked, so they don't really try wholeheartedly. And even if they do, they interpret it that it went badly, like my friend Ash, which makes their performance worse, and they find themselves in this downward negative reinforcing cycle. So maybe you should try that, win or loss. You should try to have a little, kind of like what Ray was saying to me this morning, a little practice where you keep belief in your mind. And lastly, Roger Federer, who's arguably the best tennis player of all time, I remember his commencement speech where he said that in his entire career, the best ever, he said, I've lost 42% of the points I've ever played, which means that almost half of the time, Roger Federer loses the point, but he's the best to ever do it. It doesn't make mathematical sense, but he said the key thing is what happens when I lose, which is, fuck it, next point. Learn from that one, fuck it, next point. Don't carry it with you into the next point. And that's ultimately what my friend Ash has now learned, which is scary because he's now better than me. But it's also what I had at 16, which is remarkable because we underestimate the power of the mind.
Yeah. I deeply love that.
Love that.
Yeah. I deeply, deeply love that. I think often about goalies in any sport. Yeah. So like a soccer goalie, or I played lacrosse, a lacrosse goalie, or a hockey goalie. Like, the premise isn't that they're going to stop every shot. That is not the premise of being a goalie. If you're in goal, it's going to happen. They're going to score. But you have to have a short memory and get back up and stand up there. And it might even be like a blowout. It might be 10-0. And you still have to stand up there and try and do it better. So I think often about that as well. But I absolutely love that, especially in the context of being a creative. So, Stephen, just want to say thank you so much for making the time for us.
Thank you
so much. Thank you.
Stephen Bartlett.
Stephen Bartlett, everybody.